Hello, everybody. I'm Laura Ann Edwards, and I am delighted to bring to you today the second, workshop in visual thinking for science and critical thinking with my friend and mentor and all-around amazing expert, Tom Wujec. Tom, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Laura. And hi, everyone. I'm excited to be back on this second workshop. Now, what's different about this presentation and or workshop is that you will be doing more drawing and you'll be doing more collective thinking. At least I'd like for you to do that. So please, if you haven't yet already, get the tools that you will need for this. So what are the tools? The tools are a writing utensil of some point. I'm using a digital stylus, but please go ahead and get a good felt tip marker, whatever you're really comfortable with that allows you to make different differing views, different thicknesses of lines. The second is a writing surface, so paper, good quality paper, unlined. Digital stylus is also a great thing to have. And thirdly, some sticky notes, again, either digital or physical. So those of you who subscribe to services such as Miro or Mural, you got it covered. You've got all of those right tools. So as I said, today is going to be much more of a didactic. We're going to do some live drawing and discussion and work through a number of different challenges, communication problems. We've got some fun topics that I think you'll enjoy about the nature of extraterrestrials. And we're also going to but I'd like to also do a quick recap for those of you who are attending for the first time. I'm going to spend about 6 minutes and 58 seconds or so going through a recap of what we covered in our previous meeting. So this will be the presentation part. So in a nutshell, the world is awash in images. We are surrounded by images more than ever. And the ability to think, collaborate, and persuade is more important and vital than ever, because doing this visually allows us to explore our thoughts and others more deeply and broadly. We can use images to collaborate and engage with others, for several purposes. And thirdly, we can help pitch, persuade, and sell ideas visually. This, by the way, of course, is founded on systems seeing the world as an interconnected collection of nodes, links, and territories. We're going to, as I mentioned, focus on the collaboration part, but first, a recap. We started with a design exercise called Draw How to Make Toast, originally shown to me by Dave Gray, amazing visual thinker, and so it's a wonderful tool to help us figure out how to transfer a mental model of drawing how to make toast into a visual model. And if you did this, you'll remember that there's no one correct way of making a visual model, but there are, in fact, many different kinds of models that express different aspects of the thing that we're trying to communicate. And they're fun, they're quirky, and they also provide us with useful tools to be able to understand and to communicate more effectively. A model consists of nodes, links, and as we'll also see, territories. Nodes are the constituent parts that represent typically the what or the nouns of the system. The links show the flows or the connections between them. Models typically have full nodes and links. A true system model also, for the experts in the room, will know that there's stalks and flows and various types of feedback loops. We're going to save that for session number 3. But the point is also that models reflect our biases. Americans draw toast in one way, some Europeans draw toast in another way, students draw toast in yet another way. And we all have our own particular types of biases. So why draw? Improves clarity, improves memory, solving problems, and we can sell ideas. Secondly, drawing toast with little sticky notes allows us to have a conversation with the idea. We can add, subtract, move ideas around. Drawings allow us to see our mental models. Sticky notes allow us to have this conversation, and group notes, when we do this with others, allow us to democratically create the best kind of systems model, if well facilitated. So we can use drawings in a variety of different ways to serve different functions. So we covered 5 key areas, beginning with images, and we drew this little systems model that illustrates the different aspects of how we make sense of ideas. There's the cognition, which is then externalized in some form of an image and then internalized. So at a really simple level, it's an interesting way for us to see our way of thinking. And so each aspect of this can be understood and improved. There are different kinds of images that serve different functions. There's a whole incredible, I've got a library, there's a whole section there of the history of visual images and how they can be applied to and have been used from Galileo and before and onwards. And now they're pervasive. So it's important for us to be able to learn the language so that we can make sense of them a little bit more effectively. Oh, come on, computer, what happened? Okay. We demonstrated that turning text, for example, this explanation of a particular product or project's pitch from text into a diagram can help communicate and help us make sense and also improve on the pitch. So we illustrated kind of this simple diagram as a tool to be able to translate from that back to that. So it's a powerful tool. The work from Dan Rome tells us, also fantastic visual thinker, is that over 80% of our brain's cerebral cortex processes visual imagery, largely in a series of connected, nested hierarchical systems. In fact, there are a set of pathways, at least 30 primary pathways that direct visual information to different parts of the brain. And so if we understand how this works, we can take advantage of producing the right kinds of visual graphics so that we can parse and make sense and have a hierarchy of nodes and to be able to process information. And again, putting a cat picture into your presentation will dramatically improve the empathy, I'm told. Maybe just a certain demographic. Look at those eyes, my goodness. Meanwhile, we can also process information. The same kind of cognition happens as we compare and contrast information, geographic information. So our brain is hardwired to make meaning. That information, so if we can translate information into and improve our ability to process images and also to formulate them, we got a heads up. What we're going to do today is to go through this process more step by step, one individual step at a time, from formulating to thinking about the language of cognition to represent and externalize. So I'd like you sitting at home, hopefully not watching this while driving, to think about a problem or a communication challenge or something that you would like to visualize that will benefit you and your work and the teams that you work with. So what is that going to look like? So some of you are going to put it into the form of you're drawing into a system with nodes, territories, and links, the constituent parts, into an overall structure or topology with connections and flows. So depending on how far you go, you may have a complete systems model, or you may do a starting systems model. Entirely up to you. But again, it's a way for you to shift the way that most of us have been trained in thinking, which is through equations and through verbal logic into a visual logic. I showed also that there are different preferred types of drawings that different stakeholders in an organization, as well as stakeholders in our brain, our inner CFO, CMO, CTO, and so on, like to represent information. Okay, so those are systems. We also talked about the act of designing and creating nodes. Again, nodes are the parts. And you did a little bit of a drawing class just to kind of warm up. Now you're going to apply it to something that's relevant to you. And we go through this iterative loop of imagining. That's that cognition part. Expressing. What's that magical process of turning words into an image, right? It's often seems like it's sort of on a continuum, but it's a deliberate, conscious act. And then expressing it and reflecting on it. So there's several distinct steps that typically can happen in an instant. Becoming conscious at every step is really critical. Tools, get the right tools. Again, that can be digital or physical, small, medium, and large. So, or if you're someone who works in it, the whole thing. I actually help large organizations build out their visualization studios. We talked about the dynamics from making simple to mid to rich conversations, visual, and the secret is once you label something, it doesn't really matter what the shape looks like. All you need is like a little squiggle, and if you label it computer or UFO or cup, you get it, right? But it's an anchor point that serves a function. So remember, the goal here is not to become an accomplished artist necessarily. The goal is to just simply express ideas in a way that helps you think and others make sense of things. Okay, we also then talked about our goals. This is not 6 minutes and 52 seconds. It's going to be a little longer, but I hope it's useful. We also went through, we're going to revisit this topology and structure of images and how they can, each one of these can help emphasize a particular pathway. So more on that later. We looked at different kinds of images and let's see, and we will come back to this, but the fact that you can represent something, a complex system like the periodic table of elements in many different ways. There's no one correct way. Each serves a particular function or job. And so again, the point is for you not to find the right image. That's the one the one that has the best fitness for the job that you want to perform. Okay, and then we continued to, then we did a little bit of thinking, and I think I showed some high fidelity interactive visualizations. Let's just show this. Oh, this is great. This just came out just a few weeks ago, and it's a visualization of how a black hole destroys a sun-like star, actually 4 solar mass star, and then turns it into this. This is just insane, and one of my favorite visualizations of this year. A lot of computational power in that. Nodes, links, and territories. It's the same kind of process. And by the way, this underlying conceptual model is what is driving the transformation of virtually every industry. As every industry is becoming more digitized and computable, it's really about taking the big data and of an industry, of the big jobs of an industry, like the construction of a building, and creating systems models that different stakeholders will be able to use. Whole aspect of digital twin. That's for another talk, another presentation. So again, if you understand the underlying system, that is really a clear part. Okay, all right, so that took not 6 minutes. So much for my estimation of time. So here's what we're going to do today. We are going to shift from the thinking part and kind of the language of visualization, as we just recapped, to 5 tasks, taking what we talked about and then guiding you through exercises to do the following 5 things. Number 1, aim. Clarify a diagram that you would like to produce in the course of this next over an hour that serves a job. We'll talk about what kinds of jobs that will look like. Number 2, start expressing your ideas, getting your raw ideas out in draft form through sticky noting, doodling, writing, and so on. It's an important process because none of us can produce a finely honed computation, a graphic the first time around. We have to go through this iterative process. 3, organize. What's that territorial model that you're going to use? Which is the one that will be appropriate? Maybe you try 2 or 3 of them. Try that different flexibility, stretch those muscles. 4, refine the model. Go from your sketch to a better quality sketch. There's no such thing as good writing. There's only good rewriting, editing, fixing. Yeah, you know what I mean. And then finally, share. So, share with others and get feedback. So these are the steps that we'll take. So we have a few guests here on who are going to be participating, but I encourage you at home to pause. And if this is really going to be useful for you, practice. Take the time. And it can seem really simple. You go, I know how to do this. But when you actually take pen to tablet, pen to paper, it's like, oh, yeah, I have to think. And that requires a little bit of effort. And what I'm worried about when I teach folks how to do this, here's one of the blocks that can happen. We have a time, and then effort, and like, yeah, I get the idea. Then there's a task that we are performing. We did draw how to make toast. Yeah, I got it. And then pick a problem that you need to tackle. I'm not sure what kind of problem, and then wham, we go like that. We go into passive mode like this. So this is a common problem in any kind of learning. So figure out if you're really interested in exercising that part of your brain and becoming a wickedly great communicator, take those little incremental steps and start with the simple stuff. So that's my grade 4 teacher encouragement. So the task now is this. Step number 1. What do you want to draw? What do you want to communicate? What job do you want the visualization to perform? So, well, where do you start? That's like saying, what idea do you want to communicate? It's so vast. So a couple of things to think about. There is, as you pick, are you interested in exploring a topic? Well, there's lots in the news now, from the wickedly complex issues in the Middle East to global issues to political issues in the United States to and the rest of the world, throughout to research issues that you may, some topic that you might be unclear of, that you're willing to go, I wonder what that looks like. Or some kind of collaboration. You're working with someone and the project is stalled, or you want to speed it up in some way, or you need to sell or pitch an idea. Well, what does that actually look like? Oops. Similarly, you may want to take a concept that you know really well, but simplified in a form that a colleague or someone else may need to understand, or to translate text into something that is more richer, so that someone goes, oh, I get what you mean, or to expand and complexify an idea. And so, again, something else that you may want to think about in terms of problems are these here, which include something called a horizon map. So horizon map, you may want to think about what are some of the personal things that you might be interested in. Interesting, we put it into the form of a picture, we see a spectrum. What are some of the team concerns, some of the product, services, team culture, organization issues? What about changes in society and even global issues that we talked about? So you might let your eye scan left and right to pick a problem. Again, isn't that interesting? When we put it into the form of a picture, our eye begins to dart around and we start building ideas. A little bit different when we have a blank canvas. So we had a little bit of a pre-call here, and so Malik, you are have an idea that you'd like to explore. I'm sorry, Farhan, you have an idea that you'd like to explore. Well, you go off mute and maybe we could share your view and tell us the topic that you're keen on. What's that?
Tom, were you asking for my thoughts?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been observing that there's a increasing amount of information regarding UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, in mainstream media. And so I've got a lot of questions. What is this about? Why are we seeing this amplification of this particular topic area now? Who's involved? What are the implications? What are the various implications of this type of information getting out now? We're barely out of a pandemic situation and so forth. So we've got multiple major events occurring at this point. Why now?
Why now? So this is awesome. What an interesting topic. UAPs. Oh, come on. Can we just call them UFOs, please?
Sure. Let's go for it.
So this is really interesting. So this is a way to, so this is a thinking through problem, right? So the goal of this is to explore the question, why now? And so I'm going to ask you in a couple of minutes as we go to the next phase to populate some of your initial ideas in two ways. One is assertions, and then second are questions. So I'll go through this in a second. So what are some of the observations that you're looking at? And what are some of the questions that you would like to explore? And then you'll produce a concept map. So a concept map is a structure that is free form, that is essentially a way for you to see your own thinking and then organize your thinking into logical structures, and then to embellish, enhance, test, be critical, kind of try different types of glasses on to determine what's really going on here. So what an interesting topic. Yeah, so we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, so we're going to come back to that. So that's one topic. Come on, sketchbook. Come on, sketchbook. That's weird. Now, this is going to be the age-old question. Can Tom actually communicate without drawing? And his computer has, when his app has decided not to save. We will find out. Okay, looks like actually, we won't find out because it's not working. Greg, what's the topic you're interested in exploring?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I was working with a technical team years ago, and they were we're around a conference table. Good, conference table might help there. And essentially, they explained to me that they're all graduates of IIT, which basically is the Caltech of India. And basically what they were saying was that the languages that they grew up with were all different. They were native speakers of several different languages. And in this case, obviously there were 6 different languages involved. And what was interesting was they said the only way that they could communicate together on a project, and this was a moonshot project for them, was to speak English. And I thought that was an incredibly interesting statement. And I worked with a team of a fabulous group of engineers and great success. But I started thinking more and more about this idea of communication and how do, in moonshots initiatives, how should technical individuals communicate in a way that is most effective for the success of the project? And we went through and looked at several different examples of moonshots historically that have occurred in the United States, certainly. And we started with the moon landing, Apollo 13. Then we went through and looked at challenges that have had great notoriety, including Steve Jobs, some of the things that he did technically. And we looked at how their teams communicated. What were the commonalities of communication? And it turned out that in their communication, there were certain things that were present in all of those moonshots. And so it's just an interesting way of learning what communication is effective when the stakes are really high, and how team members should communicate in those instances.
And can you share some of those as we're
sure,
some of the qualities?
And well, first of all, symbol. And it was very interesting in how we can use symbols or semiotics to communicate with one another. One great example was Gene Kranz with the tragedy that happened in NASA with the death of 3 astronauts that occurred when this was before the moon landing, but as they were trying to work out some of the technical issues. And Gene Kranz, it was very interesting. He came in and he said, all right, I'm going to work on every surface that we can write on, every blackboard. We're going to put the following statement, and essentially that we're going to be tough and competent. Now here, it was really interesting how he did this. Everywhere you went in the building, tough and competent was everywhere you looked. And the idea was that from this point forward, after this accident, they were going to be described by these words, tough and competent. I thought that was really terrific. Other things, oh, go ahead, Tom, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The other things that we saw were how to talk about reality, what is real, what is not. Steve Jobs with his reality distortion field was famous for this. And it's an interesting concept in and of itself. What do we as a team agree on is real? What do we determine or agree on is possible? The third thing was activity. What activities are important? What matters? Are we wasting our time, or are we spending our time on activities that make a difference, that really do make a difference for the project? The fourth was identity. And I thought this was really, really interesting. As individuals, each team member has their own identity personally, but as well as their relationship to each other and with the organization. And so through their identity, they can have a significant impact on the success of the project. The fifth item was awareness. And that was their being aware of one another and their relationships, as well as their awareness of how they fit within the overall structure of the project. And that turned out to be critical. The sixth item was connection. And this was so important, how they developed and made real the connections between the team members, both individually as well as with the organization as a whole. And the seventh item was contribution. What personal responsibility did they take in contributing to the project itself? And this turned out to be a huge factor in the success of a project, was the ability for each individual on that team to determine and agree upon what their contribution would be and how they would help one another contribute. So those 7 items turned out to be critically important.
Fantastic. That is great. Now you have a problem that you are working on, a communication problem or a pitch you were thinking?
Yeah, the issue is how, imagine that you're a young engineer and you have been, or an experienced one for that matter, but this is your first moonshot project. This is the first project that you've been invited into, in which you're dealing with a very focused group of people to accomplish something that is extremely important for the organization. So this, you're on center stage, and this matters. And the idea is, how could I sit down with a group of, if I was heading an initiative for a moonshot, how would I sit down with a person that is coming into this group and explain these concepts?
Got it.
How can I make it real for that person?
Okay, great. So we can. I'm going to ask you to build out a little map of this. My task for you, as you think about it when you're doing a Miro board, is can you create a single overall diagram and/or chart that will provide activities for people to understand the symbols, a way to chart a tool to help chart what is real and what is not real in a collaborative way, to build identity, to encourage people to build a self-awareness, connection, and contribution. And that's a huge task, and that would be a multi-hour task, but we could sketch that out. So I'd like for you to kind of go a little deeper and embellish this. That's when we return to your work. That's the second task that we'll go through.
Thanks.
These are awesome. And Shelley, we've exchanged emails. Actually, I didn't write back because I'm on deadline, but I did read your email. And so you have some product launches. You've got quite a massive collection. What are you doing on this call? You're running this huge business. So what tasks would you like to, what job would you like an image to help you with?
The most challenging thing right now is around language. And I'll explain what I mean. We have a project that is relevant as a product to several different large enterprises. Those enterprises share the same problem when you pull it apart and look at what their challenges are, what their needs are, and the ways to solve those problems. There's a similar solution. However, the way that those enterprises talk about what it is that they do, and they talk about the problem, is different. So the different enterprises are using different language, different words to describe the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why that's difficult from a product design standpoint is that I don't want to create 6 products. I want to create one product.
Mm-hmm.
So my challenge is, how do I create one product that can serve multiple enterprises, all of whom have the same problem, but describe and use the language to describe that problem in different ways?
So just to be clear, how do I create one product is one aspect of it. Perhaps another aspect of this is how do I communicate? Oops. How do I communicate my product in one way? So there's a lot of nuance, I'm sure. So the goal here is to streamline, to find, I'm putting words into your mouth, to create to reduce the amount of potential work, to ensure that the communication and product is relevant to people that have the same underlying exploration. So just kind of going ahead here and thinking about this, potential solutions could be clarifying, is there a single unifying message that will connect all of these stakeholders together, go, yeah, that's what I want to need, without having to speak in their language. Or perhaps there's a way to minimize the differences in targeting your value proposition to your clients. I don't know the sales cycle. I don't know all of the different elements that go into it, but you have 6 stakeholders here that you've mentioned, and we just have drawn 3. Is that reflection good enough for now?
Yeah, I think so. It comes down to you have a conversation with someone and you come to agreement on what their problem is. And because you're having conversations with multiple stakeholders in different organizations, you see that the problem that they have is actually the same problem that someone else has. But when you describe that problem to them, they say, well, that's not my problem. That's someone else's problem. And it often comes down to the language, the messaging. So we want to address the fact that different organizations feel differently about the way that they communicate and talk about things internally, while at the same time expressing that there actually are sort of higher level solutions that can apply across different organizations.
So as we will then think about this, again, just to preview, as we're, sorry, someone's doing some work on, I don't know if you're hearing this reverberation, but someone is doing some work in my studio building here. And so there is a bunch of shaking here. Hopefully that's all that it's going to be. So to reflect, we are interested, and I actually have the same problem, a very similar problem, as I've produced a toolkit of creative collaboration tools that serve different kinds of audiences, but the audiences actually have different flavors of problems. For some, it's how do you unravel very deep technical problems using visual methods. Others are about how to engage technical people to connect with the needs of their clients and customers and so on. So there's kind of an interesting transaction cost. So what is the transaction cost of someone understanding the message in a way that they get it? Not unlike the diagram that I drew before, how many mental calories, if you will, are people willing to put in until they get that aha moment? Your value proposition is relevant. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, frame and this problem here. You asked, how do I communicate? How to frame the value proposition to 6 different stakeholders. Now, we may want to change and explore that word in different ways, but that I think is could be interesting. We'll dip back in to each year. So again, the goal of this particular workshop is to illustrate. And I hope you are now seeing just the value of drawing things out. So I'm whiteboarding here. So that's Greg's idea of the how do we explore moonshots. And then the UAP, also known as UFOs. So now it's time for an exercise. What I'd like each of you to do, especially those of you at home, to clarify, to go to the second phase here, which is not this one here, it is here. What job should the visualization perform? So we talked about that. That's a really important step because it then, sorry, I've been in this building for several years. This is the first time I've ever heard anyone other than a squirrel step overside. So it's a little disconcerting on my end. Second thing I'd like you to do is to basically do what we call in the trade, and this is a very technical term, a mind dump. So a mind dump is an activity where you basically write down questions and assertions, ideas, and you sort of basically get them out onto a piece of paper. Why do you do this? Well, because we offload the cognitive cost of keeping all of these ideas in our head onto a shared surface, we begin to see what we think. We engage the practice of not just of seeing. We engage our mind in seeing the our mental models. So, what are your thoughts? Put them in the form of doodles and word forms. Unedited, flow, exhaustion. Exhaust, what that simply means is just get everything out. So we're going to take about 3 minutes, and I probably got some Miro music. So those of you who are using Miro here, so who's using Miro? Are all 3 of my 4? And Laura, you're also using. So what I would encourage you is to use the shared space here, and go ahead and pick a part, doesn't matter where, just take a little corner of the room. You can take a square, so just click on the square icon here, drag it and find the space that you'd like. And I'll just draw, I'm gonna just draw a couple here for you. Pick the one that you'd like, and another one here. So each of you will pick one of these. I'm going to just lock this now. I'm using the lock key, so it just is easier for you to go ahead and put your sticky notes on. And then now simply drag sticky notes, pick the color that you'd like, and then do a little sticky note there. You can zoom in and start typing away with the topic that you like. So UFO, and then you can move it. There's a nice little shortcut. If you press the option down, option, and then drag, you duplicate your sticky note and then just simply type into it. So it's a great way to get a lot of sticky notes. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to just kind of generate a bunch of ideas. We'll start with 3, and I got some music here. What music should we do? We should do, oh yeah, Cosmic Vibe. And I hope I pressed that right sharing button. So I'm not sure if you're going to hear the music or not. Do you hear music? Nice kind of Cosmic Vibe music. Yes, no, hearing music.
Yes, I hear it.
Okay, good. Thank you for your feedback. And so go ahead and start populating your boards, basically expressing some of your thoughts, again in the form of some questions and some diagrams. So you're basically creating nodes that you're going to later assemble and visualize to explore the topic. Oh, one more thing is actually type your question in. Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. So type your question in. So what is the intent? What's the job your visualization is going to need to do? This is probably going to take more than 3 minutes. We're going to start from there. And I'm going to sit back and relax, listen to the Cosmic Vibe music. Oh, my magic screens disappeared as well. This is a little bit of a hurt. Actually, I should just be able to wave. Those of you at home, start writing out what are the elements or the nodes that reflect on the question. So you can add further questions. My favorite kind of webcast, and just staring into the camera, thinking idly. We're going to go another couple more minutes because you're just getting warmed up. Another minute or so. So clearly visual thinking takes some time. And that's part of the, I mean, as any activity. So what's interesting here is we're seeing three people who are doing three different types of use. And here we have Laura, who we have who introduced the program, is now drawing on her tablet in this area here. And her question is how to map this series of incubators. And there is a diagram. We'll come back to you in a second, Laura. I'd love for you to explain it. What you're thinking of. We have what is the emerging UFO, right? UFO situation, what are the implications, who are the players, and we have 5 nodes here, which is the beginning, certainly with your really wanting to flesh this out. It's probably a whole other series of questions that you would want to ask and answer. And Shelley, you have customer 1, 2, 3. I think you mentioned 6, and so I'll have some thoughts on how you can use visual thinking to further elaborate on this. So let's go to Shelley. Sorry, let's go to Laura. So tell us about your diagram here and your thinking of the drawing, and then I can reflect on it. We'll go from there.
Sure. I am hoping at the end of this series of 6 incubators, where we've been attempting to level set and at least begin to expand people's thinking, or all of our shared thinking around what is systems thinking beyond the classic disciplines. So folding in all kinds of other useful practices in holistic and integrative thinking to solve complex, or at least look at complex systems issues. So I am looking in a diagram to map what we've covered. Really, I mean, that's just satisfying, but really for the reason of making the ultimate goal of this open source handy toolkit to a useful open source resource for folks anywhere, where they can go, okay, well, look, there's 30 things in here that are rapid prototyping practices or schemas that we can experiment with or use in our context, and hopefully amplify on and add more things in this open source. So I'm looking to take all of that and diagram it out, and each of these pieces would have their own more detailed diagrams, but this is sort of the thinking of the entire last 7 months.
Well, nice. Do you mind if I take a snapshot of this here?
No.
So let's elaborate and think about this particular drawing that you're making here. So I'm just going to take a snapshot of it, and we'll ask you a series of questions, which it will encourage you to I hope to think about the purpose of the diagram. So here's the drawing that you've made. I'm going to make it a little smaller here and put it into Sketchbook, and save a copy of that as well. So tell me, right now, this diagram, who is this diagram for?
This diagram was for me.
Okay.
It started out for me to visually, to whiteboard, both to reflect on did we accomplish what I set out to accomplish, or what we set out to accomplish, and to understand strengths and weaknesses of that. And then looking back, how is communicating this process useful for the ultimate thing that I care about? Is does it help anybody solve important problems? That's
Help anyone solve.
or have ways to frame and rethink. It's all about critical thinking. Does this help at all? And if not, what to play around those edges.
I might add to that. Does it help with critical thinking? Absolutely. Does it also help with creative thinking? Perhaps. So again, what you're and so on. Are there other types of thinking as well? So the purpose of this particular diagram here is to make your thinking visible. What works about it? So tell me what insight, or is there anything new that you got out of putting these ideas into this visual, into this form?
No, I think I started, not yet. Like I feel like it gave me, it's more that it gave me a feeling of of this huge thing not being so overwhelming.
Got it. Right. So that I think is a really important point, which is to reduce the feeling of, so what exactly is it? Overwhelming? Is it complexity? Is it fluidity? So what are you actually taming?
Well, all of us on this live call are tackling or attempting to map or explain giant things, and it's one thing to keep it in our head or to play with it. It's another thing to hold folks to simplify something big enough to get them to come along for the close-up views of the work of going into the pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So what I would encourage you to do, if you, as you follow through, what you've done is created, again, a series of nodes. And I'm just going to add them in a different color here. So we have a node here, a node here, and probably a bunch of them as well. So putting them into a movable format like sticky notes allows you to rearrange them in different ways. Mm-hmm. So for example, in step 3, in organizing, you've displayed, you've expressed, and you've put ideas in. You may want to pick some examples here to organize information. So really kind of the simplest organizational structure is to put things onto a line and then to assign meaning to the position on the line. So you might have something that is simple, something that is complex. So how would you organize the ideas there? You might, instead of that, use something like what's relevant to the community that you're serving. So let's call it more and then less relevant. So you could take these particular topics, maybe there are different diagrams or ideas or concepts or technologies or whatever may happen to be, and put it there. You might want to combine those together and go, all right, let's look at the degree of simplicity versus, simple versus complex, and then relevant, and then less relevant. Sorry for my. And then you might be able to take those nodes and organize them into a structure here, and then create some meaning here. So highly relevant and simple are the ones that will have a higher uptake. Less relevant and highly complex, throw those away, maybe. Maybe there's a life cycle where we, and so on. So we can, in our next section here, look at a few organizational diagrams and then organize it to help you organize information, number one. And then number two, move towards your goal of helping people solve important problems. So using the diagram as a tool, as a pathway to help someone go, oh, that I want that tool, or I need to speak with that guy or gal, or I need to find out that, learn more about the organization. So as you go through this, it helps you refine which is kind of all three things at once. What's the problem you're tackling? What are the nodes that you're actually selecting? What are the right kinds of nodes? And how might you organize them? So as I reflect this with you, you might go, okay, when you have how to expand Venn, maybe that there's more there. Maybe there's, maybe take the individual toolkit and expand that into a series of nodes. Maybe explore something, open source versus closed source. Is that the right term? Proprietary. Maybe that's part of the line as well. So do you see what we're doing here?
I think so.
Yeah. So we wanted to use this as a tool to figure out where can I add some nodes and enriching, and where do I need to simplify to create a tool that will serve the function that I want. So what I actually heard you say is you actually have two different functions here. So you have the function of organizing, reducing the feeling of being overwhelmed, taming the complexity, getting out of your head. And then perhaps the second diagram that'll emerge from this is to provide a tool to help people solve important problems or access the problems through critical, and I added creative thinking. So that's my build on top of yours, and then would encourage you to then go, okay, think about the nodes a little bit more, and then think about how you can organize them. And that you'll do that for your next exercise in a few minutes.
Great, thanks.
Cool. Okay, let's go back to oh, awesome. I was hoping that you guys are going to continue working on your graphics here. Okay, so let's riff on what is emerging in the UFO situation. So let's have that conversation. So we have kind of five nodes here, 5 ideas. And I often find that just seeing other people starting to draw, like I'm doing here, is kind of the way you learn. You go, oh, that's an interesting way of doing it. And then seeing other people doing it. So so let's take each of these questions and kind of turn it into a visualization that we can use. So are you good if I do that?
Please do.
Okay, so let's look at, let's see, how should we do this? Let's turn this into a, it's off to the side here. So again, this can be done with sticky notes. So here's, right now we don't have a whole lot of nodes to work with now. So I'm going to give you a structure that you can generate nodes and to enrich in the conversation. So for example, one structure is the good old timeline, right? And so let's put now here, and then we can, you might, if you flesh this out, bring this back over time that works. So it could, the timeline could be marked off in days, it could be marked off in decades, right? So when we're UFOs, AE, these foreseen, Roswell, 1940 something. No, of course they go back to St. Vitus, like to thousands of years in the past when we didn't identify, we didn't know what the elements are. So perhaps what we could do is have something like observations. And then interpretations. And so this speaks to the topic of why now, okay? Because we are now taking the topic now and putting it into a visual context, which is past, present, and future. And then it encourages us to think in fresh ways. So right now you have an observation, which is more UFO media stuff. Again, we're being very technical here. And then we can then begin to explore and actually look at the sightings. This suddenly turns into a ton of work. And is it reliable? Is it accurate? So I'm going to just turn this into a number diagram here. I'm making this a little small, but hopefully you can get the gist of it here. So we have a timeline of what do you want to do? Decades, years, weeks? What's the frame that you're thinking of? What's your mental model?
It's I'm actually looking at it from a very narrow focus, a very practical focus.
Okay.
And I actually don't care about the past right now in this particular situation, because it's also a lot of it's speculation. Not that we won't be speculating going forward, but nevertheless, all the past is speculation. But one thing's for sure, there is increasing amount of mainstream media coverage right now.
Mm-hmm.
We can, I think that's nobody. I mean, that's difficult to dispute because you can just call out the various coverage in the past month or so, even, and it continues to increase at this point. So what I'm hoping for is to gain rapid situational awareness. I very quickly get to a point where, okay, well, I'm seeing this phenomena occurring. And what I mean by the phenomena is that are increasing amounts of media coverage, this and then the other. And what I'd like to be able to do is say, well, where's this thing coming from? How do I make sense out of this thing, this emerging situation? And for me as an individual, because it's being pushed out to the public. So that's what I'm after at this point.
Great. So I just, in our time here, did a quick search of UFO sighting historical, and turns out there's a map and there's an article from the Guardian saying, what the heck's behind this decline in UFO sightings? Has ET gone home? So this chart shows the changes. Okay, no, I don't want to look at this. So so here we go. We have a data-driven, is this reliable or is this not reliable? That actually is challenging your point of view. So I think one of the benefits of turning this in is to test assumptions and to explore something that we all have is bias. I actually did a workshop on the 24 primary biases and the 24 primary cognitive logical fallacies that we have, and it's like you look through them and go, oh man, I did that yesterday. It's like they're so hard. And so if we're really true to the spirit of critical thinking, what this tool allows us to do is to present information not in one but in several different forms, and then analyze it, reflect on it. So here, what I've done is I've said, well, wait a second, is there an increased coverage in the media? You absolutely see that, but I as a disinterested, no, actually an interested spectator, will ask you, why? Really? Show me. What's the source of data? And you can imagine actually plotting this information out, and notice that very quickly the cost of producing the data grows, right? So it's like, if you could spend a day, a year actually producing this content. So it depends on what, how much of a stake you have into it. So I just wanted to kind of reflect and pause on that, and then return back to your goal, which is, as I think I heard you say, which was, here we are now, and how to, sorry, I'm forgetting the word that you use, prepare for it.
Well, yeah, I think I might have used the word situational awareness. I want to be able to get rapid situational awareness. Basically, so you can abstract this thing out to pretty much any you could, whether it's the early part of the pandemic or whatever, the Israeli-Palestinian situation or whatever. So here we're talking about the UFO topic. So I'm observing this phenomena of greater media coverage, mainstream media coverage, and leaning towards, and trying to kind of push down the laughing factor associated with this topic area, all the various trying to elevate it up by, we've seen the release of DoD footage from aircraft, all those kind of things. So we're seeing that, how do we make sense out of this? How does anybody on this call even make sense out of that? It's been presented to us. It's being presented to Farhan, it's being presented to Tom, to Laura, and so forth.
So here's another way. I'm still doing a historical thing because we're in the why now. So that's a context, but that's not the only visual context. You may want to, so in terms of the actual media reports, and that's a picture of a UFO, and then there's descriptions of that. You may want to visually explore this topic with to define, say, what is it that we're exploring, and perhaps there is a scale here as well, where we have the ranges of explanations. So we have, let's call it an explanation scale. It may not be a graduated scale, it may be a series of chunks. So on the one hand, we have, I'm going to just make this up, but you can explore as hallucinations. So it ain't real. Another is that it is, we actually have alien non-Earth spacecraft that are visiting us now because the human race is going to hell in a handbasket because of the virus that they implanted in Wuhan back in September of okay, so we've got that. And then there are other ranges of explanations which one can put into a metric or a scale. So what's interesting about this is that the scale is a tool to help generate nodes, help generate territories or hypotheses. So on one side, you can have one particular class of explanation. Another, you have a class of another types of, and then it becomes a tool to help analyze and then explore what's the evidence for and what's the evidence against. So what I've done is actually built an elaborate 2x2 visual model to help think through this media source. So we have the assertion of we've got, clearly UFOs are part of popular culture, and there's a range of explanations, and then one can systematically go through this spreadsheet that I've built, right, and to systematically explore it. So what that does, again, it's the visual model. So the underlying topology or the structure of it is actually a 2x2. It's actually not really 2x2, it's like a 10x2. Again, just to simplify it, we've got some set of criteria of explanation. I'm going to go a little bit further into this. And so there's some qualities here. So what do you think of what other classes or spectrums of explanation might you use rather than?
I don't know. I mean, the more I'm thinking about this, this is what I think shared as a possible thing to explore. It's truly a systems of systems kind of a situation, and where we're dealing with lots of complexity, and so I can clearly see that a variety of different visualizations would be helpful. And I would say that it would probably be fair game to explore any visualization that you possibly could think that you want to explore as a brainstorming, information dump kind of a tooling, and then try to make sense out of what you've got out there. So like each one of these complicated or even digested and refined visualizations actually might be, in the big picture, might be raw things that may or may not be used going forward.
Right. So I'm just finding some examples of using visualizations again to as a tool to that you could explore. So for example, we talked about the line, we talked about a square, which is the 2x2. We talked about the arrow and or the squiggle, which we saw earlier with the changes of the number of sightings. But what else could be plotted there in your systems model? It could be not just sightings, it could be the prevailing attitudes that are changing. There could be a fishbone diagram that illustrates what's commonly used in all kinds of industries to analyze the elements into the perception of a UFO, or kind of the forces that are causing the dynamics that are actually causing the changes in the flow.
So I could see, for example, using maybe the systems model diagramming. I could also see using mind mapping as a way to figure out what are the whole parts kind of thing in a very dynamic way. I was thinking that as I was using the your recommendation with the sticky notes, and the next part would be to organize. Something that I like. I was just thinking that the brainstorming plus the concurrent maybe organizing might be doable in a mind map. That kind of things.
So two more things I would say about that before we move to the next. One is, again, listen carefully to what your aspiration is, and to build situational awareness. So tell me why that's important. Like what does situational awareness give you?
Absolutely. So and everything that I say can be generalized. And so I would say that in order to be able to act on something, one needs to be able to have a situational understanding what the parts are, how they relate to each other, and then to have enough of an understanding of things that can be used for hopefully high quality decision making. So right now I don't know what decisions I need to make. Not that I need to make any right now regarding this topic area, but step number one for me would be to, what is this? What's going on? Why is Farhan being subjected to this information? Why is the world being subjected to this information now?
Interesting.
And so who are the players? What are the intentions? These are the things that I have. I hope everybody's asking right now. And they, and why? Well, because you're going to have to make decisions around whether they're super soft decisions or they're harder decisions or whatever they are. You're going to need to make decisions around this topic area. This is not going to be. There's got to be a reason for this thing. So we need to be able to understand what it's all about.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Let me show you a framework that it might be interesting here. This is from a richer framework here that we won't go into detail now. So it's from a video script. So, when we think about complex problem solving, there's actually systems tools that we can use to create a system to go through collective problem solving. So applying systems modeling to systems thinking. And, largely there's, let's go through here. A kind of a generalized path, if you will, where we go through identifying the problem as we did, or the name of the problem, and then diagnosing it. In fact, there's a framework for trying to diagnose the frames of reference, the pressures bearing down is an urgent problem, is not urgent, and then the underlying structure of a problem. There's actually different classes of decision-making for making a decision, different classes of problems topologically for making a decision where you know the choices, ones where we generate options, and then ones where we can only manage and exploit, and then go through a process of figuring out what are the right plays or visualizations, and then you run the plays. So this is an old version, so I didn't actually bring up the right deck that I wanted to share with you. But what's really, I think, interesting about as we think about problems and the ways we can organize problems through the principles of visualization, among other things, the plays, those are the actions that we perform to kind of make sense of them. We have kind of a range of complexity of problems that range from simple, concise, and fast, where we have simple things that we can perform, to complex, deep, and involved. And the more complex a problem is, how do you know if a problem is complex? But the more you have to diagnose it, then there's different types of tools that we can use. So from picking an individual play, that's one diagram, or combining plays like 2 or 3 or 4 diagrams, to designing meetings, to solving more complex problems, to leading change, to actually taming wickedness. And each are kind of built on the same principles, I believe. And each kind of builds to kind of a richer collection. What you're exploring is taming wickedness. And I think, as we look at these toolkits of how we can make sense of information, make sense of things, we have to graduate and figure out what's the degree of the problem that we're solving. So I just wanted to share that, maybe there's like 8 or 10 or 20 different diagrams to look at differing aspects of this problem, from the 2x2s that I've illustrated, to the diagram that looks like this, to many others. And it's the collective discussion. One other thing that I think as we work through in situational awareness, now I tend not to used to do that with the military, but not so much now. As we go through a clash of some sort of the problem to having a solution further, we kind of go through this generalized process. It actually looks and feels like this. And we're all familiar with that, and then eventually kind of settles down if all goes well. The creative process is messy, but we typically go through different stages of, broadly, there's the stage of building shared understanding. So it's basically building a shared context. Diagrams are really great tools, because if we have several diagrams, people go, yeah, that's right, or we can adjust that. And then from there, we generate options. We go through a process of, okay, how do we prepare for the UFO onslaught, or whatever wicked problem we are exploring, and having people generate alternatives, which we test and go through. And then we align on decisions or bold steps, whatever may happen to be. And there's, again, different diagrams and different activities. Often in the bold steps, they're simple. If this happens, do this. If that happens, do that. Whereas the diagrams, because complexity is the don't know if I heard it, is the enemy of execution. So often we need to make really simple diagrams to contain that complexity. So your single UFO question, is if indeed there is this low risk but high impact of the UFO invasion that will happen, how do we prepare for that as opposed to the others? So those kind of relate to that.
Well, anyway, love to have this conversation offline at some point.
Yeah, no kidding, right? So, it's again, just kind of a rich diagram here kind of helps us remember these. And when you put it all up onto the wall, we can build on the ideas together. So that's our goal. Let's move to, is Shelley still on the line?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay, I don't see on my. So Shelley, let's take some time to go to yours. Greg, I think we're going to have to return to you next week, so you have a lot of homework to polish this up. Sorry, I'm just going to. Okay, so your idea is, how do you choose a common language to describe the universe of words that exists within a software product that will have stakeholders and end users in different domains? Great. So before we go through it, I'm going to ask you the question: is that the right question? And because the common visual design thinking technique is, why do you want this answer? So what is it that you're really trying to achieve? Is it the common language, or is it what the common language will give you, which is what? So what's the goal of your diagram? What do you want to achieve ultimately?
The goal is to provide clarity to the end user and to provide clarity of the messaging of the solution to the problem between the product team and the stakeholder.
Okay, so we've got language here. So we've got this hierarchy, and then we've got clarity of the value. Is that okay? I'm going to challenge you and say, isn't your goal to get the end user to buy and use the product?
Yes.
Okay, so what if we reframe that and ask, how do I, so what's the term, spitballing? That's a terrible term. I'm just tossing some of these ideas out. What if the problem to solve is, or the task to achieve is, how do I get my my end users to understand, want, purchase, and use my product with the least amount of effort for me? And so if you use that, you end up with a different diagram with a different set of nodes, right? So even though the language will be in there, but the language will then be recontextualized in the context of what are the drivers of making a purchasing and an application decision. And so, again, the focal setting is just a little different, but that little difference can make a huge difference. For example, I was at a workshop and a fellow was showing me his website. It was a service that, it was pretty interesting here. The service was this, and service was to basically help people renew their public documents. So they basically help you renew your driver's license, healthcare, and so on. And and they were making X, whatever, I'm going to say they were generating, I think it was around $2 million a year annually. And then they simply reframed the problem, which was, or the value proposition, which was save a day of, I forget exactly what it was, work, life. So what they would do, the company would do, is they would take what would normally take a day of like waiting in line at the DMV, I guess that's what it's called in the US, and that simple change in their website turned their revenue to $4.5 million from two, thereabouts. It was just about two and a bit more. Nothing else changed. It was just a reframing of the value proposition and the message. Holy mackerel, you double your revenue just by changing a headline on a website. And so basically that was done by going from figuring out the intellectual message to figuring out the intellectual and the emotional message and bringing them together. And so I wonder, and you know, if you don't mind, I'd love to go into this in more depth next week, and we can actually build out this diagram in some detail to figure out the your customers will itemize these. Maybe you and I could riff offline and build out this diagram in some detail and go, so who are these customers? We'll protect them, but you know, characterize what are their needs and how are those needs are different. What jobs they are trying to perform. There's a whole framework for that. And then clarify how you can cast the value proposition in a way that captivates them, gets them really, aha, this is for me. And then actually look at the sales cycle and figure out how to reduce the transaction costs at each step of the sales cycle. So what we'll do is build out, you know, 3 or 4 diagrams. There's templates, canvases for this, but we'll draw them out that will address the language, but other elements as well. Does that make sense?
It does. Thanks.
Okay. Are you willing to do that? Can we do that? And then
Sure.
we can show the rest of the group what this. It'll be fun. And so that is bringing us to the end of our time here. So we got through 2 and a bit, and I hope you see the what we did, which was to see how simple sketches can help us organize thinking, remember thinking, and see that they perform different functions. And they're all made up of nodes, links, and territories. I just happen to be drawing them here, and they, the more familiar you become with them, the easier they become. The way you become familiar is by seeing examples and seeing the examples drawn out. So we're going to draw out Shelley's next, and we'll get to Greg's as well. So those will be the 2 infographics that we'll build. And Laura too, maybe we can work on yours as well. So we're going to continue on to kind of building these packages. So we've gone from the first workshop, which was kind of a huge amount of data, to the second one where we kind of looked at a number of different topics and explored in real time. And then next time we're going to kind of polish some of them up. Laura, closing thoughts and or questions? I could go for another 5.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. This has been really super helpful for me. You mentioned, you kind of as an aside, that there are pre-made canvases or things. So are there, I mean, it's something to touch on next week in the idea of tools around this.
Yeah.
So beyond the vocabulary of the basic squiggles and blobs and getting comfortable with those links.
Sure.
I think it would be helpful for folks to know that there are some super basic templates they can use, you know, including sticky notes, getting more comfortable with that. Really using sticky notes, not just kind of writing on them.
Yep. So I've spent the last 720 COVID years building out toolkits for this. And I've worked in technology. I mean, I work with large organizations to help them with their technology transformations. But the hard part is not so much the technology mapping. The the harder part is getting clarity and alignment and engagement in a team, and using the principles of design, lean, agile, and behavioral economics and others have worked out a series of plays that we can bring to bear. And I can walk through what that actually looks like. And essentially, it's all systems thinking. It's all built on these little connections of nodes and links that you can build from very simple to super complicated. So the simple ones, and I'll make this available, of what are called essential plays. So how do you post up, create questions, cluster sort, and vote, and kind of the problems that you can tackle from them. So here are specific instructions to organize them. Then there are richer sets of still essential plays where you draw things out, you make a scene, leap 2 by 2, make a map. And those are enough, again, for folks to be able to visualize. So we've covered some of them. That's the topology of the underlying structure that we use here. So we're going to get to this one next week: current state, desired state, in Greg's presentation, both Greg's presentation and yours, and Shelley's as well. Sorry.
I was going to say the other piece here that is, again, lead us along, because we're newbies at this, is facilitating this back in our teams, our offices, our friends, right? So learning at least basic useful facilitation to not overwhelm the folks we play and work with.
Will do. Okay, so we'll chat about what you'd like in that content. I think the important thing to know is that there is a world of this stuff, and you can use this really deeply. So there's plays that can be used for clarifying strategy, for transforming organizations, for different parts of an organization. But it's all systems modeling. It's all simple. And once you know that language and are willing to take those little steps of going from that mental model to a visual model to work the model, getting practice, it's pretty amazing the power of this kind of tool. People who do this work are nodding, going, yeah, well, it's incredibly useful and powerful. And it's also like calculus in the sense that in 2 1.5-hour sessions, you get a little taste of the impact, but it requires to get good at it, you get in practice. So we'll share examples of tools that you can use or where you can get them. So this is just some of them. So with that, I think
fantastic, Tom. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Hope that you find this useful, and look forward to speaking with you next time. Next time we're going to create some wickedly great infographics to make better presentations, to persuade your audience, and to make the impact that you want to make in the world. Create a nice